Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the practical session of the Educate.be International Conference on Education and Health in the context of polycrisis, with the theme, the first 2,000 days, early childhood care and education in low-income settings. Educate.be is the Belgian platform for education and training in development cooperation. And this conference is organized by Educate.be with the support of VVOB, APFE, and the Belgian government. The conference this year is a collaboration between Educate.be and Because Health, the Belgian platform for international health. This session is part of the full program of the International Conference on Education and Health, which began early this morning. Today's session is organized by HIVA, KU Leuven, Humanity and Inclusion, and VVOB. So this session is expected to last 75 minutes. My name is Oyindamila Johnson. I work with VVOB as a global project and proposal developer, and I'm your moderator for today's session. Once again, Educate.be uses this opportunity to warmly thank its member organizations, partners, and the speakers. So we're kicking off right away. This session will explore the importance and the challenges of the first 2,000 days, early childhood care and education in low-income settings. It has become commonplace that the first 1,000 years of a child's life, and by extension, the first 5 to 6 years, are crucial for its physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development. Participation in quality early childhood care and education boosts school readiness and reduces grade repetition and dropouts, and also supports lifelong learning and health. Yet, while 89% of children in high-income countries access ECCE, only 35% do so in low-income settings, leaving almost 2/3 of the world's poorest young children without these vital services. Now, we're happy to share with you from three presenters who will be presenting on projects with us today, and they'll be sharing their key insights with us. First, we'll be giving the floor to Professor Philip Verwimp for a more general overview of the theme, and then we'll have a deep dive into 2 practical case studies from Uganda and then South Africa. So I'm going to introduce my first speaker today, and then he will join me shortly on stage. Professor Philip Verwimp is a professor of economics at the, please pardon my French, I'm an English speaker, Université Libre de Bruxelles. Hopefully that was close to it, ULB, where he teaches economic development and impact evaluation. Since October 2024, Philip has worked at the Institute for Labor and Society, HIVA, from KU Leuven, where he leads the research portfolio on economic policy and the welfare state. His research concerns health, education, poverty, forced displacement, migration, and social policy in Africa and Europe. Let's give a warm welcome to Professor Philip as he shares with us his presentation.
Okay. Yeah, is it working? Okay, I'm very pleased to be here. Health and education have been among my core interests for 20 years. So I'm very happy that the 2 networks in Belgium, Because Health and Educate, joined forces to organize today's conference. What I want to speak about in the short time that I got this afternoon is about the long-term consequences of adverse shocks in early childhood. And how do I go to the next slide here?
Green button.
The green button? Ah, here, yeah. Okay, so a few months into the war between Ukraine and Russia, I was interviewed by Newsweek about the difference between childs being exposed to armed conflict and adults. And for me, it was a no-brainer, of course. And for those of you who have worked on health, it is, of course, very clear. When you're an adult, You have your human capital behind you. You're an experienced, for example, 30, 35 years. If you're then drafted in the army and you manage to survive the war, you can contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine after the war, right? But if you're a young child and you're affected by the war, it means you're stunted, your health is badly affected, you may lose a parent, you may lose your time in school, your health is negatively affected, and these consequences, they will stay with you for the rest of your life. So health negative adverse shocks in early childhood have long-term effects, much more than with an adult. And that's why I told the journalist it's so good that the Ukrainians brought their children into safety rather than the adults. And so children are much more differently affected than adults. And in my presentation, I will give more examples about that. And so when we talk about these adverse effects on childhood, we can, let's say, list them as hunger, disease, war, pollution, domestic violence, and all of them in fact have in common that even when they are temporary, even when as a young child you're just temporarily affected, a few months, a few years, they will have permanent consequences. And that's the main difference with adverse shocks in adulthood. And that's why it's so important that we try to protect young children against these adverse shocks, because we know they have long-term consequences. And so that's, of course, an adult also have adverse effects of shocks, but they are much more deep and much more consequential for children because their brain is still developing, their stature is still developing, and when we are affecting them at young age, they are finding that brain development is reduced. When they have food deprivation, I'm discussing about the mechanisms now, they are stunted, they are smaller than they should be because they have not adequate food in childhood. And unfortunately, they also have stalled brain development at young age, reason why they will do worse in school. When they are affected through illness at young age, their body is weakened, they have lack of adequate care, and it's the survival of the fittest. And those children that we see in Africa or in Ukraine are in fact already a selected group because the weakest children have already died from these adverse shocks. We don't see them anymore, so it's in fact the survival of the fittest. The consequences of war are, among others, anxiety with young children, toxic stress that places the body in a state of constant hypervigilance, making it much more difficult to control emotions. And that's what we see for children coming out of war. They are much more difficult to control their emotions as teenagers and as adults. Climate change has been meant this morning. I reduced it a bit also to pollution, where there's lead in the blood, asbestos in the lungs, which has been shown in research to cause attention deficits, memory loss, cognitive decline, and fertility problems. And this all occurs when we expose our children to pollution. And then there's, of course, the home environment, where children who face domestic violence can have derailed attachment styles, can have trust and relationship issues. And so all of these things, when young children are affected by them, they will have long-term consequences, even if these shocks are very temporary or only temporary. And the way we can look at that is, in fact, in a cycle of what I call human capital accumulation and well-being over the life cycle. If you're affected in utero, you will have, as an early child, you will have deficit issues, your stature and your brain will be less developed. That will cause a cognitive and non-cognitive decline of your abilities, as you can see on the slide, which causes then also less performance in school. You skip school, you go away from school, you have lower results, maybe you don't go to secondary school. Because of worse schooling, you will also have less ability to earn decent income. And so all these things occur exactly because you're exposed as a young child, which have income consequences and also your well-being as an adult. And then that cycle starts again. We have talked this morning about also the effects of education on health. Well, this is the flip side of that effect between health and education. It is a cycle where adults who don't care, who don't have adequate well-being as an adult, they will also have difficulties to control their fertility. They will have difficulties to also raise their children in a decent way. And that cycle starts again. is the height for HZ score, which gives you a deviation of this long-term average that a child should have when it's adequately fed. When its height for HZ score is too low, we say that the child is undernourished or extremely undernourished. And we know that extremely undernourished children will have these long-term deficits throughout their lives, which consequences in the labor market and with consequences in their entire life at school and when they want to raise their own families. And I have performed such research using anthropometrics in 2 instances in Burundi and Rwanda, which I now briefly will explain. So in Rwanda, before the genocide, there was a civil war in the north and a crop failure in the south. Now, those are 2 natural events which we then can compare with the middle, where there was no exposure to crop failure or to civil war. We call that the control group, and we used 1,700 children measured by UNICEF at the time. And we found that the civil war in the north and the crop failure in the south had different effects according to gender and wealth. And what occurred in the south, we saw that the majority of the brunt was carried by young girls. The boys in the family and richer families, they have no negative effects of the crop failure, but it were girls in poor households that were carried the brunt of these crop failures, showing a gender and a wealth effect in height for HZ scores. We did not find it in the north, where the civil war was going on. Civil war also affected boys in richer households. We did not find gender or wealth effects. So there you see that the type of shock can have a different effect on gender and on the health of boys versus girls, rich families versus poor families. And so the way we did that is to compare the height for HZ scores in these 2 regions with the middle of Rwanda, where at that time, and I'm talking about 2 years before the genocide, they were not affected by that civil war or by that crop failure. So here you see again that data collected by UNICEF at the time, who were interested in the global picture of height for HZ scores in Rwanda, can then be used to figure out what is the difference between a health shock coming from crop failure or a health shock coming from civil war. I think I already saw these results. For Burundi, I've also done a similar thing. So, you know, the Burundi war from 1993 to 2005, 12 years. What we have done is for each birth year, we have calculated, or we have found how much of the children are exposed to the armed conflict throughout their childhood. And I'm talking about 0 to 12 years of age. Yeah? And then we relate that to their school results 10 years later. And so I have the school results of Burundi's children from the universe of Burundi schools, and I'm going to relate that to their exposure to armed conflict in their childhood. And so that link is interesting. And for those of you who know Burundi very well, this is a nationwide exam called Concours National, in which we have data on school results, school outcomes of all Burundi's children. I did that for about 600,000 for 3 years of school results. And so here is the red line is the number of fatalities that are, let's say, that are confronted for each birth year. So for example, in 1993, if you're born in 93, then for the rest of your life, so from 0 to 12 years of age, you're confronted with a certain number of fatalities in your municipality. Yeah? In 1995, this is more. And in 1998, this is less, because the intensity of the civil war was already very down. So that's the red line. It's the number of casualties or fatalities that a child born in each of these birth years was confronted with during the first 12 years of their school year, of their life. Now, the black line is 10 years later, is their school results of these same children. Yeah? And you see, it's almost the opposite. It's almost inverse. So the higher the number of fatalities in your municipality of origin, the lower your school results 10 years later. Yeah? That says you something. That says you, in fact, that this armed conflict has severe impact on the school result of those children. As soon as the fatalities go down, so the intensity of the civil war decreases, the school results 10 years later then go up, meaning that it's not the fact that they're affected at the moment they do the exam. No, it's 10 years earlier that counts. It's telling you again that it's about the long-term effects of violent conflict here. Okay, and now we can in fact distinguish three kinds of effects in this work. So this is the trajectory effect. What is a trajectory effect? Well, it says that exposed children take the exam at a later age. Why? Well, sometimes because the school is destroyed. They can't go to school. There are no teachers. They skip a year. So in fact, they prolong their education and they take the final exam at a later age. That's what we call a trajectory effect. And that, when we find that violence has a stronger impact when that occurs in primary age, between the age of 6 and 12. Why? Because that's when you go to school. That's when you actually are confronted with teacher absence, with school destruction, and then you skip years. Then you're older when you do the exam. But there's also a scaring effect. The older you are when you do the exam, the worse is your score. Why is that the case? Well, because your knowledge depreciates over time. So the older you are at the exam, the worse will be your score. So you have a scaring effect also that's going on. And then thirdly, controlled for the age at which you do the exam, the effect of exposure to civil war also lowers your score, even when we condition for the HIVA test. And that's because of brain dysfunctioning during war, learning issues, anxiety. And there we find stronger impacts in early infancy, between 0 and 3 years old. That's not so much a trajectory effect that counts, because of course there you are not confronted yet with teacher absence or school beings that are closed, but in fact it's a cognitive effect. Your brain is less developed because you're impacted at a very young age. And we find these results in school results 10 years later. Here you see that the trajectory effect becomes larger when you're impacted at a later age. The cognitive effect, in fact, becomes smaller when you're impacted at a larger age, because the cognitive effect is much larger when your brain is still developing at a very young age. And so maybe lastly, if I have 2 minutes left, okay, there's a lot of research of remediating those impacts. And of course, it's very crucial to try to do that, but of course, it's more important to try to avoid these impacts, because, well, we have seen, of course, that parents try to invest much more in children to compensate for the loss they have. We have child allowances, we have income support, conditional cash transfers, we do all kinds of things. We have housing support. But I agree with what was said this morning, that all these things, we are experimenting with that. I've also been involved in these experiments, this randomized control trials. But I learned also, I agree with this morning, that we talk about scaling up these efforts to remediate these negative impacts. But the most important is to have a strong public schooling system. The stronger you have a public schooling system, the more you can support children and the more you can avoid also the negative impacts of these adverse shocks. Okay, here are some selected references. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Am I on? Thanks so much, Philip. So much to unpack here. And I'm quite sure that this would have generated, some thoughts, some questions. So we would open up the room briefly for 5 minutes of questions. Do we have anyone who has any question to share now? Okay. Yes, please. Can we have the microphone, please? Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Professor, that you involve also the in utero birth effects. We see a lot of more birth effects in war, after war, and in war. What is the effect of a birth effect, so in utero, for the schooling?
Okay.
So I'm not a medical doctor, I'm an economist. So what we see, those with birth defects have already a higher chance not to survive. And so they're either stillborn or they die in the first few weeks of after birth. And that's typically in any war situation, you will find a very high number of birds being stillborn or dying in the first few weeks or months of war. So the strongest survive, unfortunately. Yeah. Now, if you have a birth deficit and you're helped by, let's say, a lot of support from parents, from the school, you may also do well in school. But in low-income settings, we don't have that. There is no support for people with birth deficits, though they will fear the consequences, though their entire life, they probably will not go to school. there's a lack of support. There's a lack of support, and the weakest, they die also with birth deficits. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, we'll take one more and then we'll move on to the next part of the program.
Oh, thank you very much for this nice presentation. So, Stefan van Bastelaren from Because Health. What for me is very interesting is I see the climate change, the climate crisis coming to us, causing all these adverse shocks to health, now to education, to childhood development. But still, and that's my main concern, still I see medical professionals are not on board in the climate discussion. When we talk about climate, we talk about greenhouse gases and sustainable energy and reforestation. And I'm really very sad because, I try at the level of Because Health to mobilize the health professionals, to engage them into this fight for a better climate and against climate change. So my question is there, I would say, a consensus between educational experts to mobilize too, or are you even as much absent as the health professionals are? You will see in the COP30, there will be nothing on health, and that's so sad. So I don't know what's your point on that.
Right. So for climate change, I would not use the word shock anymore, because it's a gradual thing that always gets worse and worse, and it gets warmer and warmer. There's more and more variability in the rains. So it's not a shock anymore. The same as I would call the situation in Eastern Congo. I would not call it a war shock anymore because it's now going on for 30 years. The same as in Colombia. When things go on for many, many years, we can't control it. We can't name it a shock anymore. It's more an enduring situation in which people are adapting. Yeah, people are adapting the way they can. Now, I agree with you. When I talk to my general physician, for example, I say, hey, there are also here days in which the air is very polluted and we see more and more people in hospitals. So why don't you, as medical doctors, mobilize for cleaner air? Because obviously you see the result. There are more and more children with asthma in polluted areas. Yeah? Now, for educationalists, we are confronted with a polycrisis, as I would call it. There is a crisis of democracy, there is crisis of drug use in the school, there is climate change, there is now continued or more militarization. I think educationalists don't know where to start, basically. And so they want to say, let us please do our core job, is teaching mathematics, French, Dutch, and history. Rather than talking all the time about climate crisis. And so I think that's an overburden of educationalists to deal with these questions. I think they are not knowing where to start, basically, I would say. And maybe it is the same thing with a lot of physicians. Let us do our core thing, try to heal patients, but they're losing the macro questions and the global questions out of sight. I think that would be my short answer.
Let's give him a round of applause once again for that. For that very insightful session. So we'll quickly go to our case studies. And in our first case study and session, we'll be having Aline Villette from Humanity and Inclusion, and she'll be presenting on the CHANCE project, which was implemented in Uganda and applying the nurturing care approach. So I'm going to read her short bio and then she'll join us on stage to share her presentation. Aline is an experienced international development professional with over 20 years of expertise in managing and advising on programs related to early childhood development, education, and the inclusion of people with disabilities. Currently, as the technical advisor for early childhood development sector at Humanity and Inclusion, Aline offers a unique blend of technical expertise, field-based intercultural experience, and a deep commitment to equity in early childhood, as well as promoting the well-being of children and their parents. A big round of applause for Aline. Yes.
It's on, then maybe my voice is soft. Yeah. Then I will introduce today the CHANCE project that Humanity and Inclusion is implementing in Uganda. I will also test your early childhood experience because I will speak in English, but my presentation is in French. I will also test my own ECD experience. Just as I need to also, this is not the green. I don't think I don't know how to recognize green. Green arrow. Ah, it's too big. Okay. All right, just as a preamble, just to say that for Humanity and Inclusion, early childhood development is under health division. And our objective is to strengthen health system, to improve the quality of healthcare and the access to healthcare for children in the objective of improving global the child development. All right? And because we are HI and in our DNA we promote the inclusion of persons with disability, within ECD we are also targeting more specifically children with or at risk of development delay or with disability. Why I think it's important to be based on health, it's a great opportunity, in fact, working on health to be in contact with the children and their parents, because at a very early age, children are coming in health center, like as in utero, etc., and for regular checkup. And for children with development delays, we want to act early. And then the early touching point with the caregiver and children are health in general in countries. Just also to mention then, we are ECDs under health for HI, but we also want to apply what we call the nurturing care framework, which was launched in 2018 by UNICEF, WHO, and the World Bank. And this nurturing care framework is really proposing integrated approach to ECD. It define clear, based on evidence, it define clear initiative, clear way of supporting the development of children. And in what it's mentioned, it's you should combine 5 key components, which are health, nutrition, education, responsive caregiving, and safety and security. What is important with this framework, nurturing care framework, is it changed the paradigm in the health sector, I think. We are no more focusing on survive. We want the children to survive, of course, but we want them to thrive. And thriving, it's really for children to develop to their full potential. And it's only when children will thrive, then we will be able to transform society. In fact, to break the chain of impact on human development that adversity can have in early childhood development, and that Philippe presented in his earlier slide. Then even in HI, we are based like ECD is under health, but we are working on this global approach, including education. Just very quickly, why we focus on ECD, I think Philippe already mentioned it, but we recognize the importance of the first 1,000 days. It's key for the development of children. It's the foundation of brain development. And we want to support this specific age range of the child. Now I invite you to travel a little bit with me in Uganda. Then we have this project called CHANCE. We implement it in the West Nile in 2 refugee settlements. And usually refugees are coming from DRC, from South Sudan, or they are fleeing from for conflict, from wars, and it's and only in the 2 refugee camps, the refugee settlement where we are working in VP and Reno, there's already 12,000 kids living in those settlements from 0 to 4, knowing that in Uganda, even only in the north part of Uganda, there's 48 refugee settlements. And in the rest of the country, there's much more settlement. Then we can say that in Uganda, there's already thousands of children living in a context of polycrisis. What we can see in this context is the rate of mortality for child rate mortality under 5 is quite high. The malnutrition rate at national level anyway is high, but we also know that for the refugees that are just arriving, the rate is also very high, showing that they really had a quite really short-term shock in their nutrition. And the schooling rate in early childhood education is very low. Then they arrive in these camps, and for sure, all the services that they need, the services that provide nurturing care or can support their caregiver to provide those nurturing care that they need for their own development, are very limited. There's limited access to health, limited access to nutrition, limited access to education, and they have caregivers that are stressed and not fully available to interact with them in a good way. Then what we are doing, as I said, we are targeting especially the children with development delay. We really want to work for the most vulnerable. And the 4 things in this project, we are identifying the children with development delays. We are working in different levels. First at community level, just to be able to screen, to have a large screening of the child population in the settlements. And we also partner with other key institutions at community level and of course also at school, where they also identify children with functioning difficulties. And we have a whole team based in health center who is doing a full development assessment to assess if like the status of development of the child. And we are using the Malawi development assessment tool for the ones that know this. And here is the picture of one colleague in Uganda doing MDAT assessment of a child that have probably be pre-screened at community level. And the MDAT is an assessment that you have to observe what the child can do for his age. There's a range of activities that he's supposed to do in different, as gross motor, for his gross motor domain, fine motor, cognitive, language, and social. And you have to check what the child can do, and you identify if he has delays or not. Then we have a really huge work to identify the most vulnerable children. And once a children has been, the development of the children has been identified as delayed, then we provide some services. As we are in a settlement, unfortunately, the national services are not always available. Then health centers are dependent of NGO, protection services are dependent of other organizations. We also, HI is also providing our own services then I try to organize it at different levels. We have direct services for children, where we have a full team of rehabilitation staff who is providing rehabilitation for those kids. Then the rehabilitation staff is based in the health center. And provide some rehabilitation some rehabilitation, and also we work on technical aids. For parents, we support them with some parenting, and we are implementing a parenting program called Baby Ubuntu, which has been specifically designed for caregivers with children with development, and we really try to focus on their needs. And we also have one-to-one counseling on early stimulation for the family to provide individualized support to the children, advising them on which kind of activity they can do at home, usually play or communication activity, to support and to boost the development of their child. And globally, for the family, we also have some social support. Then we have social workers working with us to provide social support. And for parents, because in a situation of conflict or polycrisis, it's very important for them to have some mental health and psychosocial support. Then we also have some activity on mental health and psychosocial support for parents of children with development delays. We also work with others partners on education, etc., but I will explain a little bit more. This is a picture of how it can look like to be in this camp and to have a rehabilitation session. Usually they are taking place in a center, in the health center, but sometimes our physiotherapists or rehabilitation staff are also going to the community to provide support. And on the right, it's assistive device. Within this project, we also have the chance to have a 3D printing. Then we also do ortheses and protheses with the 3D for the kids. Still more picture. Here you have a picture of the Baby Ubuntu group, then the parenting group. Then we are usually gathering parents of children with disability. They decide when they want to meet, and they commit to meet regularly, usually for 11 sessions, for 1-2 hours. And they discuss parenting content, I would say, like, for example, the importance of playing with the kids, positioning your kids, feeding your kids, etc. Then they get some information, so some practice advice on what to do. But on top of this, they really create also a peer group and a support group. And this is really important also for their own mental health, to be part of a group. On the right, it's how it looks like when the team is going to the settlement to support parents with stimulation counseling. The tool we use, it's called Blue Box. And here, there's one colleague who is coaching, in fact, the mother to do a particular activity with her child to help this child to progress on this area. It's very small, but what I wanted, it's maybe. Then on this slide, I try, in fact, to show how we integrate different components of the nurturing care framework. Then, as I said, we work on health, especially with the identification of children with development delays, providing some rehabilitation services and technical aid, but also partnering with other NGOs who work on health. For example, there's other NGOs who look at all SRHR, prenatal services, etc. Of course, when you work on ECD, all the things that is happening, making sure that a woman has safe pregnancy, safe delivery, it's very important. Then we are also working in link with them. We really work on cross-referral, saying that if a baby is born premature, we like the caregiver to be referred to our service after 2 months or 3 months to have an assessment and to support his development if needed. And we train also health staff on the nurturing care for them to also understand all this, the importance of early years. Nutrition is also important point of contact for us because all children with malnutrition are at risk of development delays. Then we really work closely with the partner implementing nutrition activities for cross-referring. We also support them in skills, in increasing their skills on how to support parents with children with disability, who often face feeding difficulty. Then we want them to know how to manage those issues. Responsive caregiving, as I say, is really important for this change project. We apply a dual approach. We support children, yes, but we support caregiver. Not supporting caregiver doesn't make sense for me. Parents are the first in line. I mean, they are spending all their time with the children, and they really need to be strengthened. That's why we provide parenting education, stimulation counseling, and mental health support. We want to strengthen the interaction between the parents and the children for the child to grow well. I really think also it's help with education. When we speak on education, for me, it's really early opportunity of learning, and it happened even before, it happened at school, but it's happened before school, and having good interaction between parents and child allow, en fait, this early learning opportunity to happen at home. Then it's also what I mentioned on the side of component on the component on education. We also support. We also work with other organizations in the camp who manage early childhood education center and also primary education for inclusive education, and also cross referrals. And we help them to do some identification at school for them to refer the child. It's another way of presenting the activity, but it was really to say that then we work in integrated way with all these components, but we also work at different level. Of course, caregiver is very important, but by themselves, they cannot do everything alone. They need to be supported. They are key, but they need to be surrounded by a community that also supports them. And I'm still sorry to say, but in Uganda, there's still a big stigma around disability. And this is not a proper environment to raise the kids. Then we also are working on this. Ideally, having opportunity to play at community, at village level, having some community leader, etc., recognizing this, the need for children to play. This is really important. We also work on service level. And not only health, we, as I said, this is health, education, protection, at different level for the needs of the child to be recognized, and the workforce equipped on how can they integrate those children within their activity, and first to understand why it's important to integrate them. And at national level also, we are partnering with the Ministry of Health to improve the policy and to help them also to implement the objectives they have in their the Ministry of Health, knowing that the Ministry of Health in Uganda really want to institutionalize the identification of children with development delays. And I think it's, we also need to accompany them on doing this. I will share some results to end. We did a midterm evaluation early this year, and I just share few results with you. We supported 313 children with specialized services. And when I say we support, it's really, as you said, it's children with development delays. It's really intensive support. Huh? It's rehabilitation. It's all the support we do for the parents, etc., etc. It's not a one shot and it's done. It's much longer. It's a real intensive support. And when we did measure the progress, it's based with the MDAT. And we saw that 78% show some progress in at least one domain, then meaning motricity, language or social domain. And 16 even catch up with their delay. We also have 119 parents that really change their practice at home, and then they play more and speak more with their children at home, which is also a good sign of future change, a future support for the child. What I would say here, because maybe for people that are not used to work with children with disability, we can't expect for every kid to catch up the universal path of development. Some children we work with have a development delay because of malnutrition or toxic stress, etc., but some have deficiency. And we cannot expect them to go back to a universal, if I can say like this, path of development. But what we want to obtain is for them to progress in their own path of development. Then this is our goal. And I will finish with this picture of a family, a smiling family in West Nile, inviting you also to go and check the exhibition downstairs, like in the welcoming hall of Enabel, where those much more nicer pictures are also exposed of the Chance Project. Voilà, and just maybe to end with some few recommendations, which is for me, like, as I said, if only in Uganda, there's thousands of children living in this kind of polycrisis environment where we know they don't have access to all the nurturing care services they should have to develop well. It means in the world, it's probably millions of children living in this kind of environment, then they need to be prioritized. And we also need to think about the children, the most vulnerable ones that have already a delay in their development. And of course, I want to emphasize the importance of having an integrated approach, working not only on one domain, but on multi-domain. And just to end also, I just want to say that the Chance Project in Uganda is funded by the Belgium Cooperation, DGD. Then I also want to tell them thank for the kids from Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aline, for that presentation. And I need to thank her specially because before she came up, she only knew about 2 to 3 seconds before she came up that she'll be presenting in English. So you can see her presentation was in French and she thought she was going to speak in French. So it was just 2 seconds before she came that she knew it to be in English. And I think she's done a fantastic job all through. And thank you to all my panelists so far. Everyone has been spot on. We haven't had to shut down the mic for anyone speaking over the time. Everyone has just been, within the time limit. So thank you so much. Any questions at this point? Lots of hands. Okay, let's see how many we can take. The hands again, please. Okay, ladies first. Let's start from the lady. Yes, please.
Bonjour et merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. May I say it in French or should I speak English?
Whatever is comfortable.
Whatever is comfortable. So, bon, comme on n'a pas eu beaucoup de français aujourd'hui, je pense que c'est intéressant de le faire en français.
So I think that I will speak French. This Chance Project, is it developed in Uganda only or throughout the world? I am a coordinator in a school in the French-speaking community of Belgium. Very recently, we have been working with disabled children, so I would like to know whether there would be some training opportunities for our students.
Yes, please.
In English, yeah. Okay. All right, no, just then the nurturing care project, we implemented in 3 countries. Uganda, West Nile, in the settlement, refugee settlement, in Kinshasa, in DRC, in urban context, then a different context, and also in, we were implemented it in Rwanda, okay? Still funded by the Belgium cooperation. It's not called the Chance project, it's a nurturing care project, same objective, then really supporting child development, focusing on children with development delays, but all countries have their own way of implementing, like to adapt to context, to adapt to the program. Yeah, and I hope we will have a lot of babies, yeah.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we can only take one more question. Please go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, I will discuss it, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Jan Apperlo. I'm coming from Liliana Fonds, which is another disability-focused organization based in the Netherlands. So I appreciate your presentation a lot and your apply an example for a multi-sectoral approach. What I'm curious about, you mentioned institutionalization briefly. What have been your challenges and successes with institutionalizing this multi-sectoral, holistic, I would say community-based rehabilitation approach?
Alors, I was speaking about institutionalization of identification of children with development delays. For me, there's a big opportunities because right now in many countries we have health staff or health community worker going into village and in contact with those family and children and doing growth monitoring, then age and weight. There's an opportunity to really push the needle a little bit to have a development milestone screening. I'm not even asking for the, full MDAT, of course not, but I'm not even asking for the short, but, just checking key milestone. In a lot of countries, I mean, I don't know, but in Rwanda, for example, they also have the early learning development standards, and they know what they expect the kids in the country, what they are supposed to do at which age. Then it's maybe easy to extract, like 10 activity max that the community worker can check. And if there's a red flag, then you refer to the health center. I say this, it's maybe not that easy, but I think there's really a big opportunity to really push the needle and not trying to change the paradigm of growth monitoring for development monitoring, because it's only the way to identify the children with difficulties and to support them. And after, it depends on country. Some are already some birth screening, more on deficiency, more and more. Development, it's a little bit behind still. And that's true that in Uganda, I think there's a commitment from the Ministry of Health. They already have also a partnership with UNICEF for another project where they implement also the early notification with MDAT IDEC, as HI is doing within Chance. And they really want to scale. Then they need support for this also.
All right, thank you so much, Aline. I see some hands are still up, but we are very much
one question.
We're a bit running behind time.
Just one question.
10 seconds?
Yes, very quick question.
Okay.
We do identical work in Palestine through CBR and through the support of ABFE, and also we are partnership with HI. My question is, who implements this intervention? Is it through CBR workers or community centers or specialized mainstream service providers or mix of that?
It's a mixed. We like working with community-based worker. I mean, not like, but we prefer working with national staff, national system. Then in all those 3 countries I mentioned, we usually work with community health worker. all right, especially on early stimulation, parenting for a caregiver. For the more the specific intervention, for example, rehabilitation, we work with rehabilitation staff. Then, depending on the context, in Uganda, it will be HI staff, because unfortunately, there's no rehabilitation staff in the settlements. But for example, in Rwanda, it was with the national rehabilitation staff. Then, depending on the activities, we'll rely on different staff. But ideally, we'd like to work with the national staff, with the staff in the system, in the national health system.
Right. Thank you so much, Aline. A big round of applause for her once again. So moving on to our third and final presentation for today, I'm introducing Hans de Grave, my colleague from VVOB. He's the Global Strategic Education Advisor. Quick bio, and then he comes for his presentation. Hans has worked with VVOB for the past 10 years, both at the country level in VVOB's office in Suriname and in the global office. His thematic expertise includes teacher professional development, early education, play-based pedagogies, and gender transformative education. As VVOB's gender focal point, he is currently engaged in the Regional Teachers Initiative for Africa, RTIA, contributing to the scaling of gender transformative pedagogy across the continent, including in early childhood education. A big round of applause for Hans.
I think we can start with a small video, and then I'll start my presentation.
Follow, follow, follow. Follow the leader.
Namhlanje sizofunda ngezinhlobo ezahlukene niyezwa zomsebenzi esiyenzayo sizofunda ngodokotela niyezwa okay yini umsebenzi kadokotela
udokotela wami uyindoda esebenza esibhedlela
uba uziphe naye
indoda elapha bonke abantu abagulayo emhlabeni
kumbe udokotela ugqoke into enjani uzunanesigqoko baba bathanda ukuba iphoyisa la usipha kumbe iphoyisa lenzani
iphoyisa indoda enebhedi nesibhamu
iphoyisa liphathani kombe
indoda enamandla indoda uzulu
ubani unomene usiphelele igama lephoyisa usiphelele othanda ukuba i-firefighter-ke manje sigqokani kombe isicishamlilo sona
okay le ndoda inamandla futhi iyakwazi ukugibela iye phezulu igama lale ndoda eyisicishamlilo
sicela ukubona wakho nazo-ke fire niyathanda yini ukubabona labantu engikwazi sibajwebe
Sanibonani, igama lami nguZandile Mvelase, ngiwudokotela. Igama lami nguThobile Gwala, ngiyiphoyisa. Igama lami nguNontobeko Mkhize, ngisebenza ecishamlilweni, ngiyisicishamlilo ngaphansi komsunduzi Fire Department. Esibiza ngama-left irons, yabo? Ibophela isigebengu, isibophela bese sihamba kanje. Awukwazi ukuba nesicishamlilo esingeyena umfana wena ngoba wena umfana. Phathi nakho nje mina ngiyintombazana.
uthanda ukhipha abantu icorona
nonke ngifuna ukuba amaphoyisa ngizoba amaphoyisa ngifuna amantombazane kakhulu azoba amaphoyisa khona sizoqeda zonke lezi gebengu egcwele la.
First of all, yeah. The wonderful video made by our team in South Africa. First of all, I'm sad that Fiona is not here to present and that you'll have to do it with me. She would have done a better job, but so be it. Maybe I shared this video before with the other presenters, and Edith, I'm going to paraphrase you. He sent me an email back and he said, Hans, nice video, but what's it doing in this session? What does it have to do with health? We're talking about early childhood development, health, education, and you come with a video that would have been really great in a gender session. Well, the reason I think that we're talking here today about this program on gender responsive pedagogy in early childhood education is that, I mean, we've heard today already many times the links between gender and education and health and how it impacts women differently than men, how it impacts how the workforce is very female. So there are many links between education, health, and gender, but there's also a very clear link in the sense that gender inequity and gender discrimination leads to health risks, is a problem for health. We can see a lot of different ways in which women and men are impacted differently in terms of health. I'm not going to mention all of them, but there's differences in to what extent women suffer from depression and anxiety. There's differences in the way men or women suffer from suicides, intimate partner violence, that is the result of gender discrimination and gender norms, leads to illness, to reproductive health issues. So it's very clear that gender inequality is a problem in terms of health. It's a problem worldwide, but it's especially also a problem in South Africa, where this program is working. Again, quite a few statistics here. I'm not going to mention all of them, but we see that in South Africa, a woman is raped every 36 seconds. Women are still much more affected in South Africa by poverty, by unpaid care work. It has, sadly, I think South Africa the highest or one of the highest numbers of intimate partner violence and murder in the world. So it's clearly a big challenge for South Africa, for the team, for the education system. How does the education system deal with this very clear issue of gender equality, gender discrimination, and gender-based violence in South Africa? And for that, one of the things that we found out, or that we found out, is that it's crucial to start early, and I think it links also quite well to what Philip was talking about earlier. What happens in early childhood lasts a very long time. You take it with you for the rest of your life. And gender discrimination, development of gender identities, gender stereotypes, that's also something that starts in early childhood education. A lot of people who might have children who've sent them to early childhood schools will probably have noticed that maybe if you've tried to raise your child with relatively gender neutral, as soon as they enter into school, they come back with a lot of stereotypes, a lot of ideas about what boys and girls should do. So education can be a reinforcer of stereotypes, but we also believe that it can be, and we know from evidence that it can also be something that can transform stereotypes, can transform and can challenge gender inequalities and gender discrimination. Because we've seen from research that boys that are exposed to positive non-violent role models when they're small, when they're young, will be less inclined to themselves act violently to their wives or children. Girls that grow up in supportive environments, they will have stronger self-esteem and they will have better mental health. Early childhood interventions that can reduce adverse childhood experience will prevent certain health risks that children have later in life. So there's a lot of good reasons to start early on in general, but especially also for children's health. And it links to different areas of health. I mean, first of all, of course, it's about mental health. I think that's the easiest link that we can find. If children are able to grow up, are supported to to develop themselves according to their own talents, abilities, and interests, they will have more self-esteem. They will be feeling better in their own bodies, and they will have less stress levels. But also a lot of what's happening around bullying is very often has a gender dimension, is often because of people's gender or the way that they behave or don't behave according to the gender norms and the expectations that we have for certain genders. But there's also, of course, things like toxic masculinities that lead to additional bullying. So in that sense, there's a very clear link to mental health, but also physical health and well-being. Yeah? If we encourage all children to engage in the activities, in the interests that they want to do, if a girl wants to play soccer, if a boy wants to go dancing and doing ballet, it sort of encourages them to access sports, to have an active lifestyle, to pursue what they want to pursue in their personal lives, in their professional lives. But of course, also, yeah, the link to violence. I think it's clear. If we can reduce gender-based violence because we tackle gender stereotypes early on, we will have a positive effect on health outcomes, but also on adult risky behavior or adult risk-taking behavior, addictions, those kind of elements. And then thirdly, of course, there's the link to socio-emotional health, a strong part of the work that we're doing around gender-responsive pedagogy in early childhood education is also focused on it's really that idea of empathy, respect, tolerance, allowing everybody to be who they want to be. And that leads to much more healthy relationships for children with their peers, with their teachers, but hopefully also with their parents and in their communities, because it's a very, very important part of the work also is that we're trying to create gender-responsive environments, but we're also trying to challenge the gender norms, the gender stereotypes, the gender discrimination that happens outside of the schools in societies by talking to children about these things from an early age. So what does that approach look like? So for us, gender-responsive pedagogy, like I just said, it's on the one hand, it's an approach that supports teachers and school leaders to create learning environments where every child can develop themselves according to their own interests, abilities, and talents, but where we also try to challenge and to try to discuss and to try to raise existing stereotypes and gender norms that exist in society, and to engage reflectively and critically with children around these issues. So in that sense, that's why it's also gender transformative pedagogy. It's not just adapting or being responsive to different children's needs and abilities, but it's also about transforming really the way that we're looking at as a society at the roles of women and men and boys and girls and people of different gender identities. I'm not going to go too long on it. I don't know how much time I have left. Not so much, I think, if I look at the clock. So I will speed up a bit, but we're almost through the important part, so we'll be fine. When we're talking about gender-responsive pedagogy, what does that mean? We have a model that is divided into 4 broad categories. The first one is the instructional context. So there it's really supporting teachers and school leaders as well to create learning environments that either don't have too many gender stereotypes, or if they do have gender stereotypes, to at least make sure that gender stereotypes that are present in books, in posters, that they are addressed, that they are the focus of discussion with children. If there is a book where all the pilots are men and all the nurses are women, then okay, we're not going to replace all those books. You know, we're working in resource limited environments. So, but what the teacher can do is have a discussion with children around this. Can a woman also be a pilot? Do we know any men who are also a nurse? These kind of things. So we try to focus on the instructional context. So it's the learning materials, the learning environment, the learning activities. Another very important part is the interactions. A lot of gender stereotypes and gender norms are conveyed very often unconsciously through the way people interact differently with men, women, boys, and girls. The way how many opportunities boys or girls are given to actively engage in class, to ask questions. It can be in the types of tasks that children are given. these small little sentences like, I need 3 strong boys to help me carry this basket up the stairs, or there is this girl crying, can you please go and console her? It's these small kind of things that convey a lot of these stereotypes. And then of course the relationship with the communities, but also of course not in early childhood education, but when we also have gender responsive and transformative pedagogy programs in higher levels of education, the world of work, when students start to do their internships, it's very important that we also involve them. And similarly also when we do study and career guidance, or in the case of student care, there's also very important that we support teachers and school leaders to be very aware of the stereotypes that are conveyed in those kind of settings. What is our approach? I'm not going to talk too much about it, but yeah, I mean, what we have developed in South Africa is it's a blended teacher professional development approach. So it combines, on the one hand, online courses with face-to-face training and orientation sessions, and then professional learning communities that teachers set up themselves in schools. And there is also, very importantly, a part for school leaders that need to also support that more broader gender responsive school environment. I'll stop with this slide. I have another one, but I think it's not so relevant. So as my last slide, what are the outcomes that we're looking for? It's a bit of a staged approach, because what is very important when we're talking about gender stereotypes, gender norms, and gender responsive pedagogy is that, first of all, there is a certain amount of understanding that needs to happen at the level of teachers. There is a cognitive kind of element in there. So there is also, we always have some kind of training included that tries to clarify a number of concepts, things around gender. What is a gender stereotype? What is a gender norm? These things are important if you want to be able to have useful reflections with teachers about them. So that's always the first outcome that we try to have. It's a bit of a cognitive input. And the second part is always much more on the reflective, on the critical reflection. Teachers need to reflect on their own gender beliefs, on the gender beliefs and norms that exist in the societies, in their schools. What we sometimes also call it, it's a process of sometimes unlearning certain things that are set and are imposed upon us by society. And then once that is only when those 2 steps have been taken, we try to support teachers very practically to really give them very practically advice and tips, activities, materials that they can work with to address gender stereotypes in their teaching environments. And then what is the impact that we are seeing, and that we have also seen through some of the research that we are doing, is that of course we want children to be able to socialize in a playful and more equitable learning environment, but we also want to see children demonstrating behavior in their classrooms that is free from gender stereotypes, that they display gender non-conforming behavior, that girls and boys actively interact with everything that's in the classroom, and that's much less gendered than that we would see normally. I'll pause and stop there, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
We are a little bit behind schedule, so I'll do this very quickly. Do we have any responses from? Okay, so I say hand over there, please. Yes, thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for the. Hello, yeah, thank you very much for the perfect presentation. I'm a student and I'm curious about the culture and religion gonna be challenge for your project and how you're gonna solve this.
Yes, no, it's a very good question. It was also the first question I expected, so that's good. I was prepared for that one. Yeah, no, it's an issue. It clearly is an issue. I think the first thing that we have learned is that contextualization is key, and there are certain extents to what you can do depending on the context that you work in. What I think is also very important is that gender equality, or it's very what we very often hear is it's a Western concept that's being imposed upon on other cultures. But I think if you see in any country that we work in, there are, in all those countries, there are groups, there are people who are striving for more gender equality. It's not something that is only pushed upon from the West onto the countries. And there are women's rights groups and in all the countries that we are doing this work. And what I think is very important is that we make sure that that we explain very well what we want to do. The idea is not to impose certain behaviors or certain things on people. What we are trying to do is create an environment where every child has the opportunity to at least pursue those things that interest them, that fit with their abilities and their talents. And that, I think, very often when that is explained in a respectful and collaborative kind of way, and we create enough time for this reflection, for this dialogue also, that we see that after a while people do tend to kind of, if there is a certain resistance, that resistance does become a little bit less pronounced as you go along. But it is indeed an issue, and in South Africa we actually had quite a big problem with it when initially we, and I say we, but when I say we, it's actually the government of South Africa who's been implementing this at quite a high scale after the pilot that we did with VVOB and the government of South Africa. But they had a lot of pushback internally in South Africa from a number of religious groups, which, yeah, more and more I think is also the environment for these kind of gender responsive programs is becoming more and more restrictive. And we also saw that in South Africa. But I think luckily the government stood up, and the Ministry of Education has decided and has explained why they feel this is important, and they are continuing with this program, regardless of a relatively small but quite vocal group of people who were very much against this kind of program. And they found that it was imposing gender ideology onto the children of South Africa. And yeah, there was quite a big, quite a big affair to deal with that. But also there, you will see when we try to deal with that, we made sure, I mean, as VVOB, we did not intervene. I mean, it's not our place to do that. It's the government of South Africa who wants to implement this in their early childhood schools. It is the government of South Africa who has to stand up and explain this to their constituents. And that's also what they did. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Hans. We have finally come to the end of today's session. Unfortunately, we can't take any more questions. I think that's a good problem, to have more questions than a very quiet crowd. So at this point, I'm going to invite Philip and Aline to just join me upstage. And in less than, in 30 seconds, please just sum up your conversation. What is that final key takeaway that you want our audience to leave with today? Hans has been, so let's have Philip.
So no more questions from the online audience? Or?
No.
You want a brief summary of takeaway messages?
30 seconds.
Okay. So I think the academic literature has tons of evidence on the long-term effect of adverse shocks in childhood. And that's some of the evidence that is really written in stone today. There are hundreds of studies about that, and I think that makes it crucial that we protect very young lives, so that we prioritize the protection of young children, exactly because their adverse shocks have such detrimental effects. So if you have $1 million and you want to invest them in a 20-year-old students at a university or in children between 0 and 3 years old, you have to choose the 0 and 3 years old, because investments at very young age, they have a large effect. And that's my key message. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aline.
We know the adverse effect that crises can have on early childhood development, and we know how we can mitigate this effect thanks to the nurturing care framework, which define clearly how we can support children to develop their full potential. Then solutions are here. I think what we are lacking a little bit is more government, more funder, more NGO, more organization, or more goodwill to really try to implement this integrated approach promoted by the nurturing care framework to support early childhood development. But the solutions are there. Then we know the problem, we have the solution, let's try it. We will do mistake, this is fine, learn about it, and let's try to do more for children. And I will say I love all children and I want all children to grow well, but there's unfortunately most vulnerable, and they are living in conflict in polycrisis context. They are children with development delays. Then also let's think about them.
Thank you, Hans. Your final
Okay,
thoughts?
yeah, I think it's not going to be so different, but I used to work for Plan International. That was in 2010. We already worked on early childhood education at the time. At that time, we were also saying it's these numbers that Philip was sharing, and it's the same also for education, for health. Investing in the youngest children is the best investment you can make. In those 10, 15 years already since then, I haven't seen a lot of increased investments, especially in early childhood education. If there is a choice to be made, it's still very often made for primary education. If we're in a context where funding is going down, I'm a little bit worried about what it's going to do for the early childhood and also for the early childhood development world. So I hope that we can keep on making this case, that it's, yeah, like what you said and what I also said and what you also said. I mean, the investments that you make last a very long time if you invest early, and whether it's in health, whether it's on cognitive development, or whether it's on emotional or mental health. So I think that we hope we can continue to make the case, but it's not looking too bright, that future, I'm afraid. On that happy note, I'll pass it back.
Thank you so much, Hans. We know what the problems are. We have the solutions. Let's continue to make the case for continued investment in children. And on that point, we wrap it up for today. A big round of applause once again to my panelists. So thank you so much to my esteemed panelists and my audience, both in person and online. And thank you for engaging with us and sharing your questions. And please continue the conversation on social media. And a reminder that the presentations and the recording will be available on the website after this program. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.